Hello, everyone. Well, in my life, there are two things that makes me really uncomfortable. One of them is speaking in public, and the other one is speaking about myself. And today, I'm going to do both of them. So I'm miles away from my comfort zone. So that's resilience. That's in the title. Distraction, isolation, resilience, and the dog. I know that doesn't make any sense for you right now, but bear with me and you will find out. I was born in Santiago de Chile on 1977. That's 42 years ago, if you're trying to do the maths. I had great expectations for my future, as you can see in that picture. My father was in the army, and my mom was in the army too. And we were living in a Santiago that is not the same Santiago that you are living right now. This was a place that was full of hate, violence, from one side and from the other one. The country was divided. The music was not the cheerful lyrics that you hear now. It was all about revolution, rebellion. It was all about politics. So luckily, we went to live in Punta Arenas, far away from the epicenter of the crisis. Punta Arenas is a very special place. It's so isolated, and in those times it was worse than now. They even call themselves the Independent Republic of Magallanes. They even have their own flag. And there I learned, and I lived this experience that was isolation. Isolation is a very special feeling, because if you don't get to manage it the right way, it can totally take your breath away. But if you get to manage it the right way, it could give you a great feeling of freedom and independence. So isolation was the first thing that I put in my backpack of life experiences. And then I added nature. Nature down there in Magallanes is crazy. If you think about it, it's the southernmost city in the world. You have 2 hours of daylight in winter, 20 hours of daylight in summer, winds that goes up to 170 kilometers per hour. When I thought that everything that was as far as we could go, we went to live in Porvenir. Okay? 5,400 habitants. Half of them were in the army. The other half hated the army. So it was a very bizarre place to be for me. Remember, I was 11 years old there. So I was very excited. My first day to school, I was very excited about meeting my new classmates, my teachers. I got to this big concrete building, huge hallways, kids running everywhere. I was getting closer and closer to my classroom. I was already preparing my introduction speech to my classmates. And suddenly, I was against the wall with a knife at my throat. They wanted my lunchbox. So that was my welcome to Tierra del Fuego. I was in a place that no one wanted me there. I was the enemy. Most of these people were suffering from the cruelty of a regime that was at that point Pinochet's regime. And I was on the other side. I was the enemy. My parents were in the army. But it was not my fault. It was not their fault. But we had to deal with that. This was a very historical moment in the history of our country. We needed to go back to democracy. But I was going to get killed in the process. So I had to think about the plan. Because one thing was to deal with extreme geographic isolation, but another thing totally different was to deal with extreme social isolation. So I had to find a way out of this. I started to create a master plan. I got home. My sister arrived that day, and I realized she was going through exactly the same experience as I was going. But she was one step ahead of me, because she already had in her backpack stones to defend herself from bullies. So I had to find a way out. I had to find an answer. That was my house. And that was my backyard. And that's where I found the answer. My answer was in nature, was in my relationship with nature. I had all this backyard. I could go walking and stay away from humans as much as I could. so I could walk for hours without seeing anyone. I could feel nature in its purest way. I learned a lot of other things, of course. I learned music, I learned coding in my state-of-the-art computer. Then I got the newest version. That was an IBM Aptiva 386, 40 megabytes of storage, 32 bits of pure power processor. It was pretty fun to learn to code on that. But the thing about this place is that it was still the best years of my life. I spent the best years of my life in Porvenir, in Tierra del Fuego. I learned something that is very special and that I put in my backpack of experiences. That was resilience. 2 years after that, we went back to Punta Arenas. This time, I was 13 years old of pure experience. My backpack full of these items and tools that I could use. So I started feeling this thirst to serve. I wanted to be useful for society. I wanted to do something for society. So I walked to my father with full conviction. I looked into his eyes and I said, "Dad, I'm gonna be a firefighter." He said, "Nope, it's too dangerous." That was pretty fun coming from someone standing in front of 3 huge tanks. But he was right. What was I going to do as a firefighter with 13 years old? So I decided to wait till I was ready. So I turned 14 years old, and I made a big decision in my life. I joined the Navy. So I traveled to Valparaiso. I left my family behind. I thought that was going to be a really hard situation. I was 14 years old. But all the experiences in Tierra del Fuego and Punta Arenas made me get over it. I was in a learning process for almost 5 years there, and then I decided to move on. Not because I didn't like it. Being in the Naval Academy was the best experience of my life. I enjoyed every single second there. I learned skills and things that I put on my backpack of life experiences that I would never learn in anywhere else. But I decided to study sound engineering. So that was a very interesting career, because checking on the ranking of the engineering careers in Chile, job possibilities, it was on the very last. So my chances were pretty open. And I knew that that was going to require a lot of effort and a lot of positive thinking and attitude. Well, very positive thinking and attitude at that point. But then I realized that that's the meaning of personal responsibility. You make your decisions knowing the consequences of them, but then you need to deal with that. And that is very important. You can make that kind of decisions, but you need to take the whole responsibility for that. So personal responsibility became another super important item that I put on this backpack of life experiences. Through this process in the sound engineering, I was so lucky to work with people like Bruce Dickinson, with Bose Company, that I admired them because of their consistency and commitment to research, and many other things. It was a very fun journey. But I was getting calm and comfortable, and that started to make me very uncomfortable. So I still had this feeling that I wanted to serve, that I wanted to be useful for society. So I met him. We started creating a bonding, we started training, working together, building up this relationship, and suddenly we became first responders. This was a very interesting and amazing experience for me. The only problem of that is that you have to start dealing with hard things to manage, like distraction, desolation, and suffering. The first thing that happens when you get into a disaster zone is that feeling that everyone is gone. It's a ghost town. The cars are there. The homes are open. Their pets are in the streets. There is a deep silence. It's like a hum. I call it the sound of desolation. There is a smell that it smells like sadness. It's something that I can't explain, and there's this thin layer of fog that is everywhere. You get into people's homes, and you find their personal belongings there. You see their pictures of their families on the night tables, their posters on the walls. You're in there with this sense of awareness, sadness, and hope. And your dog is doing the job. He's searching. Time to time, he looks back and like asking you, are you okay? But they're doing the job. You meet amazing people. They start arriving. All the help starts arriving. It gets noisier. Machines are working. The days turns into night. The nights into days. The clock is ticking. You can't go to rest because time is running, and we're running out of time, and it becomes critical. The graffitis, the nonsense graffitis that you see on the walls become super important messages. We start writing a story on the walls of this city. All this information becomes important information for the rest of the teams. This is an example of Hurricane Katrina. This is what we write on the walls. That information evolves to this, to more information. So each team arrives to these places and know exactly what is going on inside there. You meet amazing people. People that is willing to leave everything behind. Amazing dogs too. Some of these people lose their jobs for doing this. They lose their couples. The couples leave them. They lose their families sometimes. Just for going somewhere and help others that they don't even know. Not just the first responders, also people that is just willing to go and help. To bring happiness to these disaster zones. This made me really frustrated at a certain point. I thought it was totally unfair. How can this happen? How can these people be spending their money, leaving their families, losing their jobs, and doing all these things? But then I remembered personal responsibility. You assume the consequences of your action, and you make your decisions according to that. Also, you see a lot of injustice in these scenarios. Suffering brings out the best of us, but also the worst of us. I can't understand situations like this on a disaster. I can't understand that a construction company, in order to reduce costs, use half of the materials that they need on the foundations of a building, like what happened in Alto Rio. I can't understand that someone irresponsibly gives an order to soldiers and they die in cold. I can't understand that. So I decided to move on. I was in a different state of mind in my life. I thought that Daco already, he should go home, live like a pet, chasing a ball, shooting a shoe, laying on top of the bed. And it was time for me to go back to the outdoors life. Enjoy it in a super calm and peaceful life, or way, in a very peaceful way. So I decided to climb a volcano and write it down. And that's how I got to Lonquimay. In Lonquimay, we created 2 companies. The 2 of them are helping more than 10 families to generate an income at the same time that they keep the traditions of the culture alive. So what did I learn with all this? That you never stop putting things on this backpack. You never stop adding elements to this backpack of life experiences. So my advice for you could be, stay calm. Keep adding things to this backpack. Good things, bad things, successes, failures, all that goes into the backpack. But don't leave it in the closet. You can even put a dog if you want in your backpack. I'm super convinced that you can't keep yourself for yourself. You need to share what you know. You need to share what you have in this backpack with the rest. Hopefully, in a constructive way. So also walk with this backpack. All these items that are useful for you and for your life, that will make you who you are. But don't stop learning, because you never know who you're going to learn from. Thank you.